Hello everyone, and thank you for joining the second Constructors Couch on behalf of the Worshipful Company of Constructors. The theme for today is sustainability and construction materials, and I can think of no one better to talk about this than Deborah Pullen. Morning, Deborah.
Hi, morning, Paul.
Deborah started her early career as a materials scientist, successfully completing a PhD in advanced composites. She then spent more than 15 years delivering and managing research programs and businesses in industry and government, developing new materials and products in the defense, aerospace, autosport, oil and gas, and medical sectors. She then joined the Building Research Establishment, which we all know as BRE, and the construction sector 14 years ago to set up and direct a government-funded national knowledge transfer network to increase the skills in using innovative materials and manufacturing methods. In 2014, she received the MBE in the Queen's New Year's Honours List for her achievements in innovation and knowledge transfer in the construction sector. She also took on the responsibility for directing and developing BRE's own research and education programs, finally becoming CEO of the BRE Trust in 2018, the charity which owns the BRE Group, expanding its outreach and social impact through a growing network of delivery partners from academia and the charity sector. Thanks for joining us on our virtual couch, Deborah. I personally love the fact that you are a scientist and constructionist, so I thought I would start by asking you, how did you join these two forces together?
Thanks, Paul. Well, I guess, material science is all about understanding the chemistry and physics of materials. How do they work? How do you design and develop them? When do you select the right ones? And I guess, having done 9 years at university, really working with industry on new systems, my venture into the MOD really put me at the forefront of performance requirements, because at that time, particularly a lot of the work we were doing in defence structures were being transferred to civil applications. So I worked a lot with Airbus, and they were looking to massively increase the number of aircraft they were producing, and also increase the operational performance for the airlines. And it was a competition really with Boeing, because they were leading forces. So I guess at that time, my experience came to understand how do you select materials, optimize them, the manufacturing methods to give you that appropriate outcome, which is reduced operating costs, using less fuel, and the ability to make more of them to meet particularly the increased travel in air in the Far East. And other sectors, such as automotive or oil and gas that I worked in, may well have had different drivers.
Okay.
And having more resilient products, again, meeting mass production. So I guess as well as understanding the fundamentals, it was more to do with getting into the weeds of what do we want to use them for and for how long, what is the economic model and everything. So when I came into construction, it was very much the same. And some of the work I'd done 20 years ago was starting to become very relevant to construction and all the transfer and upgrades that it needed. So I guess my knowledge of the environmental impact was very small, other than knowing that composites materials aren't that great to recycle. No. So I guess it was about trying to bring that fundamental to the marketplace, and in this case, it was construction.
Wow. Okay. So I when I speak to people in construction, and there's it's quite common that it's like so a lot of people have family in construction, and or they have a role model, someone in their life. Did you have anyone in your family or a role model of someone when you were growing up? And
I not really. I mean, I guess for me, I've got a sister, and she's an electronic engineer in the automotive industry. So we were both scientific, I guess. Right. But I think in terms of any sector knowledge, I mean, I came into construction knowing very little, and as soon as I was there, I realised how little I did know. But what I did know was my science, and I guess I've worked to try to find a place to apply that, and also realize where it isn't applicable.
No, I get that. That's cool. I mean, looking deeper. So in terms of the impact of certain high-profile construction materials, such as steel and concrete, the impact on the environment. Where do you think technology is leading? Is it towards complete alternatives or adaptation to the existing offering? What do you think?
I think it's definitely a mix of both. I mean, we're seeing where existing materials, they're looking for more renewable forms of them or lower carbon impact. They're also looking for replacements with other materials that maybe have been proved in other sectors. And I think the biggest challenge is when they're actually combining more and more materials. You know, monolithic structures offers some advantages of simplicity, but really if you're trying to tune things, you know, having a mix, that brings its own challenges though, because when you want to disassemble, dismantle, reuse, that creates more of a challenge for you. But I think it's definitely about enhancing, mixing, matching for the right application.
That's true. I think it's massively challenging, and I think, you know, over the past 3 years, we've seen sort of, I'll say a mini explosion of environmentally friendly adaptations to existing materials, such as, I mean, off the top of my head, is carbon absorbing concrete, but the industry has arguably been slow to adopt them, which we're quite famous for in slowly adopting new things. But why do you think this is, and what can we do to rectify it?
I guess it's not dissimilar to other sectors. You know, when I started working in aerospace, you know, the driver was always to move to composites from aluminium and titanium. So, you know, it can take a lifetime actually for that transition. And I think they say, necessity is the mother of invention, in the sense that you get to a point where you can't do it anymore with what you've got. I think the other aspect is validation and proof of concept is really critical. So, you know, again, certification of new systems is expensive. It takes time. Who's going to bear the brunt of that? And, you know, when you see concrete is a really good example, actually, because concrete's been around for thousands of years in one form or another. And, you know, I always give the example of the dome at the Pantheon. Is one of still the largest unsupported structures using concrete. But of course, concrete is used massively. It's quite an affordable material, but produces a lot of carbon. And it needed big projects such as the London Olympics, actually, as a single project, to be at the right scale to bring forth some of the formulations that had been sat on the shelf for quite a long time using lower carbon cement. And it was really because they'd set themselves such a high target for being the greener games. They really could only achieve it using this. And by using low carbon cement and therefore concrete, they achieved 60% of their targets in the Olympics by doing that. And then that's now slowly filtering out into other major jobs. But I guess where you have a sector that is kind of fragmented, who's going to bear the brunt of the cost of testing, validating, certifying? Aerospace have the luxury, I guess, of having one or two key primes who can support their sectors to do that, because they're ultimately going to get the benefit from it. But it's not so easy to do in other sectors.
No, I think it's a good one. I like what you said about how other industries have a similar sort of challenge in that sense, and I think it goes back to that kind of who's gonna get up and do it first, or take the risk.
Yeah.
So you've got different challenges from different people within the construction. You've got clients, you've got contractors, you've got suppliers. And I personally lean towards clients, and that's that the clients drive change. And so, for example, if as you said with those games, I think there's probably a client decision, or the person running those games to say, let's drive this, and everyone's like, yes, okay, fantastic. And obviously it's to do with money as well, and all the other stuff. And I think that's really, really good insight into what you just said, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing, just to add to that, though, actually, the reason why I love the built environment and construction in particular is that you do have the opportunity to have groups which are pushing particular things. So which actually you unlikely to do in other sectors that are highly integrated and controlled. So, there are lots of examples where I guess movements, if you like, of designers and manufacturers are pushing for renewable materials, and it's there and evidenced. I guess the challenge is, there's no one answer suits all, and how can you increase it to the masses? And there is still a large section of our sector who, through no fault of their own really, don't have the opportunity to reskill, upskill, work with others. They don't have the margins to do it. Their clients aren't asking for it, as you say. So we're not getting that transfer of knowledge where it's sitting there in the sector and it could be used, but we're not getting it through to those middle-sized and lower firms because they're just trying to carve out a living for themselves, really.
I know the nature of construction, it's a low margin industry, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a good challenge. Do you think that's what you just said was the biggest challenge in reaching our environmental sustainability goals, or is there something a bit bigger, a bit wider?
I think there's more than just the build. I mean, it is interesting how a lot of the, a lot of the providers of systems to the trades are also doing their bit in Wolsey and, with all of their centres. They put a lot of effort into providing sustainable products. But I think it is the client draw, and also who reaps the benefit, the economic benefit from it. It's all about risk, really. Who's going to take the risk? And if you're in a trade and you know your skill and you come into an environment, you know what you're doing, who's going to help you if things don't work out quite as well as you hoped? And really the client has to start to support its supply chain. And we're seeing that, with some of the bigger players in our sector, they are taking on board both the shared risk and the shared benefit with their suppliers, but they can do it at their scale. It's how do we feed it down? The other thing as well is to understand, I think, the operation of buildings more. And a good example of this is I did some work recently looking at corner shops, and single sort of businesses, convenience stores, and actually in any city, that dynamic, there are thousands of those outlets and they use quite a lot of energy in heating and cooling. Often the buildings aren't very good quality. The landlords don't look after them. So but the benefit and the impact they could have on the whole carbon and environmental impact is massive, but they need to have some help and support to do that. And it's an initiative that the local council, if they want to be a clean or green town or city, they could potentially put schemes out there to help those operators do the right thing by the equipment that they buy. So, retail is an interesting sector to really driving change. So as you said, they're the clients. You need to have the occupiers and the owners of buildings pulling through, as well as the construction sector trying to provide the right service.
It's true. So, I mean, it's that top-down kind of, I think you say, and obviously the clients have clients, which is basically probably government, and then obviously, but everyone has their own responsibility as well. So kind of clients are driven by customers, and customers are driven by clients, and then so if everyone changes, and I think that's really interesting what you said. I think especially with the convenience stores and how that level as well. It's a massive impact if, let's say, we get that kind of result. And so I'm moving to the BRE, and I'm very interested in their work. And I actually went to visit. I think you organised a tour of the BRE, and impacted me massively. I'd never been to BRE before. And can you tell me more about them? Tell us more about them and what there, basically.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, BRE was a government lab. Formed in 1921, it was privatized in 1997, like many of the national labs, and I guess since then it's reimagined itself, I guess, for one of a better reason. It still has a very strong and important role to play to help government understand policy through science and engineering, and it still delivers to a number of regulatory requirements in relation to supporting industry to get the right products and services that meet those needs. So, but I think its role as a risk manager or supporting industry to manage its risk in applying new systems, enhanced systems in relation to testing them, validating them, and then certifying them. That's really the heart of what BRE is now. And to do that, it needs to actually have, a very good understanding of all these things that I talked about in terms of not just the physical performance of it, but how is it going to be used? And also the economic drivers are critical. There's no point in having a brilliant system that people can't afford.
No, I think what I loved most is having you test buildings within buildings. So you create the buildings and then you test things in live and obviously under controlled environments. And I thought that was amazing. And then you had the kind of places where you stick all samples of materials and different types of woods, and that was amazing. I think anyone has a chance to see it, so would make them happy, I think. So many, if you ask any builders or people in construction, when you mention BRE, they think, I mean, especially construction, people in construction, they think of BREEAM. I think I'll correct that right. Sorry, I said that right, but which basically sets out best practices standards for the environmental performance of buildings. But how else have the BRE pushed the industry to achieve our environmental sustainability goals?
Well, I guess you made a good observation there about BRE, and I think from its capability point of view, moving into understanding the occupation and use of buildings compared with building them in the first place is really been a driver. Because actually, if you look at the carbon calculation, far more of the carbon is created during operation than built. But I think as an organisation, understanding and applying that physics. So as you say, it's to allow industry to come and look at its products or its systems in combination with others at scale and go through various testing scenarios and feed that back really is great insight to them in terms of how their products will perform. And I guess BRE is building its capability doing that. And, bear in mind that, we spend more than 80% of our time indoors.
Yes.
And, the outside does affect the indoors as well, in terms of pollution levels, because it all comes back in. But I think understanding also the health impact that buildings can have is another strand that BRE has done work in the past, but it's university partnerships, and that's really was a critical part of my job actually, as group research director, and then also leading the charity was, how do we develop capacity and capability and understanding of the whole system, the physics and the social science around buildings, and trying to codify that and feed it back into the industry who design and operate is really important. And I think it's something that's, BRE spending quite a lot of its time and effort working and building its partnerships up to do that.
So it's a very impressive establishment. And I think you are a very impressive individual as well. And I think personally, I can see the passion you have for the industry and the environment as well. And just wanted to conclude, obviously, then this podcast by asking you, what's next for you in your journey within either science or construction or both, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. When I made the decision to sort of, I guess, step out of the role, I think I'd done my time. I'd applied a lot of my knowledge around knowledge transfer and brought that to the trust and to BRE. I'm still passionate about the use of things and understanding and learning so much more about the sustainability of things. Has been a pleasure, really. And as I said, I knew nothing. I drove a sports car and wasted things like everybody else. But you really start to focus in on your own drivers and your own personal journey. And one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about my work is working with others. So the universities, some of our younger staff, the graduates. So I'm hoping to carry on doing some guest lecturing at universities, and I'm sort of branching back out now into wider engineering, because I think, you know, the engineering discipline, whether it's mechanical, civil, I guess are there already, but, you know, particularly in other industries, everyone has their part to play in understanding what sustainability is. And it isn't just about environmental, it's the social and economic. And the more I can bring that to life and really illustrate it through talking about projects that I've been involved in or I know about, and the construction sector have a lot to show others, actually. Yes. The good and the not so good. So I'm hoping to do more of that, and I've been invited to do a few things. I'm also carrying on being a technical advisor, independent advisor to a number of the charities that we've worked with. And again, the charity sector in terms of social impact are critical, and they're massive. And what they need, though, is more knowledge, relevant knowledge, data to work with, because some of the charities we work with are, you know, they understand what social impact is far more than I do and BRE, and we've learned a lot from them. So being able to work with them and still be able to apply my knowledge, and also understanding a little bit about how to run a charity. I've got there's one charity that I'm going to be a technical advisor. There's another charity I'm going to be a trustee of, and I guess it's that sharing, that heart of knowledge transfer, which I guess has been core to my development. So I'm just hoping to do that and create the portfolio career people talk about, where I can do different roles in different organizations and still draw on all the things that I really enjoy.
That's fascinating, I think, and I particularly liked your comment about, you know, when you were driving a sports car and you became more conscious of it, and what you said about obviously kind of joining forces with when you start talking to people and becoming and getting more knowledge and knowledge transfer. And I think in particular I like so your work on the you're the chair of the scholarships and awards committee at the Livery Company.
Yeah.
The first podcast we did was with Martin Gettings, and I think you two together, I mean, and personally, I'm a fan of him, and I know you like him as well. So I think he's got some great ideas, and I think when you two in the same sort of space, I think is like a powerful amount of knowledge just to explode on the industry. And I think that's one example of knowledge transfer and how when you start to become a bit more conscious about sustainability and environmental sustainability, you start opening yourself up to people and having more influence on other people as well. And I think this is a prime example, I think. So yeah. So I just want to say thank you for your time and continue the great work you're doing for our industry. And I hope that, I think this is obviously another stage in your journey, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do next, for sure. And I thought I'll leave you with the last word on this. If you have anything else to say, just this is the opportunity to do it. Yeah. But if not, then I think we can conclude the interview for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me, Paul. It's actually a very interesting time for me. And, you know, I've spoken to a few people who were surprised that I left. There's been a plan going on in terms of that. But also, you know, it already now, when I'm in a room or in a meeting, I can be myself more. Yeah. And you know, good or bad, right or wrong. And I think that's a bit of release for me in relation to what I'm doing. And as you say, you know, coming into the company, you know, the reason why I joined the company was because the BRE Trust were already sponsoring a scholarship, and I had the opportunity to become a member. And you know, I love the fact that on the committee we've got such a range of people, young and old, and male and female, and from different cultural backgrounds. And I'm learning so much, because part of that role was about really what's in this for the scholars. You know, it was very much about We could have a perfectly operated system where we were all happy and we tick the box and people do projects, but engaging with the scholars themselves and finding out what their career path is so far, what they can gain, can we add more value to them, and keeping that at the heart. And as you say, Martin Gettings also is incredibly strong at that. It's like, you know, we're giving people an opportunity, so we need to learn from them in relation to making our program even bigger and better going forward. So thank you for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Deborah. And thank you for all of you for watching. And if you have any comments, feel free to email me at the email address you'll see on the screen right now. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.